guys from Portsmouth. They have done tremendous work reaching an enormous audience with their games. So they're here to talk about how you can make enormous games with tiny teams. So please welcome to the stage.
Hey guys, thank you. Also, thanks for turning up.
Want to use this?
Oh yeah. Microphone.
They help.
Hey guys, thanks for coming to the talk. So essentially, we've got around about half an hour presentation, which we'll go through, and it's all about how to essentially make huge games with tiny teams by utilizing user-generated content. So my name is Andrew Griffiths. I'm Community Marketing Manager at Freejam.
My name is Alex Mean. I am a lead programmer and also a designer at Freejam.
So a little bit about our studio. We are based in Portsmouth, UK. There's about 50 of us. We have 25 developers working on Cardlife and 25 developers working on Robocraft. We specialize in user-generated content games. The main reason why we specialize in those, so we founded the studio in about 2004. There was not very many of us, about 6 of us. And essentially, we had ambitions to make huge games, but fundamentally, we were always restricted by the amount of work our developers could do, purely due to the number of hours in a day. So we decided to utilize UGC because we knew that if we established a good UGC platform, we would then have the community making content for the games that we had, which would be tremendously exciting for us.
Technical difficulties, classic.
Okay. Yep, it will flick through. There we go. So, what are UGC content games, just so we're all on the same page? So, looking around the room, there's loads of developers, a few friendly faces, which is really nice. User-generated content games fundamentally are all about community making content for the community. Now, if you look on the slides just above here, which hopefully we're not obscuring too much, you'll see Minecraft, Robocraft, Roblox, Little Big Planet, and Super Mario Maker. Now, all of these games are huge. All of these games have lots of content made by the community that have far outweighed the amount of content the developers made themselves.
So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Robocraft. It is Freejam's first game, as Andy says. It's a multiplayer online battler game where players build robots that they take into battle in teams to fight against other players. We have 500 different parts in the game, things like different weapons, wheels, tank tracks, wings, rotor blades, all that kind of thing. And every robot that you see in the game is built by a player out of those parts. There's a huge amount of variety. Every battle you go into is going to feature completely different robots to any other battle you play that day. So, there's a tremendous amount of variety that we could never have produced ourselves. So we have hopefully a short video of the game in action and Andy's head if it wants to play. So when Robocraft was first released on Steam, there was about 8 devs working at Freejam, and now there's about 25 of us. But you may have seen this information that was published by Ars Technica a little while ago. That indicates that Robocraft is the 17th most played game on Steam, which is an achievement that we're incredibly proud of. We've seen 13 million players in the game in its lifetime, and collectively they've built something like 150 million different robots. So we really, again, that's a huge amount of variety. So we really like to think of the game as being one that's been created by a tiny team, a tiny dev studio, collaborating with this huge community of robot builders.
Which brings us on to Freejam's second game, which is Cardlife. Now, obviously, Robocraft's been around for a really, really long time, and we'll go through some of the lessons and some of the things we learned about how we made the game a success. And we've applied a lot of those lessons to our second game, Cardlife. It's currently available in pre-alpha. We released it very early, and it's a game which is essentially it's a survival game experience. So all the characters that you see in the art just above my shoulder is 100% created using something called the connect the dots system in game. It means that everything is editable, including core game properties, core server properties, just via JSON files. And players can create their characters just by editing PNGs outside of the game, as well as using the connect the dots system in game. It's due for release next month, which is crazy because it's been in development for a couple of years. We're really excited about it. Take a look at the game here. So those are the two games that we've built. They're both UGC games. They both have UGC built into their core. And we're going to tell you a little bit how we built them, the lessons that we learned, and what, hopefully, knowledge we can impart to help you guys if you ever want to make a UGC game yourself. So there's always a question of how you build a community and how you build a community for a UGC platform. Because fundamentally, you need a big community to make your UGC platform successful. Otherwise, you've just got a game, an elaborate sense of tools, and nobody's actually doing anything with it. So what we learned from Robocraft really, really early on is that we needed to develop the game and the community kind of in tandem together, and essentially use both to kind of feed into each other. And we'll go into the reasons why we did that in a sec. So with Robocraft, we launched it really, really early. We're talking like we had a launch prototype put together within 3 weeks. We worked on getting a website up and running. We had some official forums so people could talk to us. And we did that in around about 3 weeks. We released it as a free alpha. I think we spent around about £5 per week getting some Google AdWords sorted so they could chuck us some people to actually come to the website. And our first demo had pretty much nothing in it. Like, all we had were wheels, cubes, and one single environment. There wasn't really much gameplay to speak of. There was no objectives, no tutorial. But the reason why we did this, even though that initial demo didn't really reach our vision of what we wanted Robocraft to be, it meant that we would have people in from day one talking to us about what they wanted from the game, telling us what they wanted, telling us what they hated, reporting bugs and things like that. It was really, really important. And we were in there in the trenches with them day one, basically responding to everyone, trying to nurture this sort of relationship at a really early stage.
So this was employing something called the Lean Startup. There's a book on it if you're ever interested. It is a strategy that was developed in Silicon Valley to help tech startups get off the ground. So if you think about like traditional software development, traditional game development, you've got this here, there's what might be known as waterfall process. So you design your game, you develop your game, you put it into testing, you launch it, and then you start getting feedback from your consumers, from your audience, what's working, what isn't. And we didn't want to do it that way. We wanted to be able to work with the community right from the very beginning and incorporate their feedback right away. So using the Lean Startup methodology, you've got this real emphasis on learning. So the process that we follow is we come up with an idea for a game or a feature. We make as minimal a version that captures the essence of that idea as quickly as we can, launch that as quickly as we can, and immediately start measuring how it's doing, against our expectations. That's both through in-game analytics, but also through talking to our community, using the forums, sometimes even calling people up one-to-one and speaking to them and getting their feedback. We then build that feedback into our next iteration and launch that and measure that, and we're constantly sort of repeating this loop as quickly as we can, learning as much as we can from each iteration. And our goal is to obviously find success, something that we call product market fit. Now, one of the other advantages using this process is sometimes you're on the wrong track. Sometimes things aren't working out. And by going through this process quickly, you're going to learn quickly that something isn't working, and that gives you the opportunity to pivot, which is then change your product or change your market and try and find success elsewhere. And we think it's worked out quite well for us. And in fact, I'd like to tell you a little story. Some of you may be familiar with a chap by the name of Kevin Systrom, who is a big fan of Kentucky whiskey or bourbon. He's also an app developer. So he and his team made an app called Bourbon. It's a little similar to Foursquare. You could check in at places you were, maybe bars or distilleries, and talk about the whiskies you'd enjoyed there. And it also had some features where you could sort of arrange gatherings and get all your whiskey drinking friends together. Unfortunately, the app was a bit of a flop. People just weren't using it the way that they expected them to. It just wasn't really working out. But they did have analytics built into the app, and what they noticed was the photo sharing features that they put in were really popular. You take a photo of a bottle of whiskey and put some nice filter on it and send that to your friends. So they decided, well, let's pivot. Let's not really worry about this whiskey thing anymore, and let's make this app really for photo sharers, which they did. And that app is now called Instagram. And a year after that was created, after it was launched, they sold it to Facebook for $1 billion. So, that's a really good example of a really successful lean pivot. By reading the market and changing your direction, they found a huge amount of success.
So here are some things that we learned about UGC in general. So we've talked a lot about kind of the philosophy behind UGC games at this point. So now we'll start going into a few more details. So
I think we've actually stolen each of the slide there slightly.
That's all right. That's fine.
So we think of UGC as falling into three main categories. The first of these is passive UGC, and this is where Robocraft lives. These are games where making content and using other people's content or interacting with other people's content is a fundamental part of the game. It's not a conscious decision, I'm going to go and find something to play with, I'm going to share my work. It's just that's how you play the game. There's no real way around it. The second form we identify as core portal UGC content. Super Mario Maker and Roblox are good examples of this, where you have an in-game portal or perhaps a website or something like that where people can create content, paste that up for other people to see, somebody can browse it, go, that looks fun, download it, then interact with that. And the third form might seem a little weird, but we really think that mods are a good form of UGC. We can go into a bit more detail later, but if you think players or your community making mod content is adding value back into the game that was originally created. And it's worth pointing out that these are not mutually exclusive. You can absolutely use 2 or even all 3 of these different forms within one title. So for example, in Robocraft, we have a feature in game called the Community Robot Factory, where you can sort of upload your robots, other people can then download them and play them themselves. So really, you can sort of pick and choose and just kind of figure out what is best for the game you're trying to create. But the common theme here is that the community is creating stuff and adding value and content to the game far beyond the scope of what the developers could potentially produce themselves.
Which brings us on to the creative versus consumers kind of relationship. So we've talked a lot about the differences between different options that you can have for passive UGC, portal UGC, and mod UGC. What's worth talking about is that ultimately you need a symbiotic relationship between creators and consumers, and we'll go into the reasons behind people create content for your game in a second. But the important thing to note is that for a passive UGC game like Robocraft, or what was the other one that you mentioned?
I think we had Crossout on that slide.
Yeah, Crossout as well. Don't like talking about Crossout, but we'll talk about Crossout. And for those sorts of games, the building something is built into those games' DNA. Like it's pretty much a one-to-one overlap between creators and consumers because it's baked into the experience. Like with Robocraft, first thing you really do is create your own robot. For portal UGC games like Super Mario Maker and things like that, obviously, if you buy that game today, you've got so much content to go through, so much more than the actual creators, developers themselves created. But there's so much content there that you'll find that most people never actually get around to using the tool set that they have to create levels. The important thing to note is that, that's okay. That doesn't really feed into it being a valuable portal UGC platform or not. And the same goes for mod UGC. Now, obviously, with mod UGC, you need a talented set of modders to create content for your platform, but you really can get by with less than 1%. Like, it's all about skill, but it's also about the content that they create. So you only need a tiny percentage of people to create for your game. So you might be thinking, I could do a Portal UGC platform, or I could make a UGC platform, but who's going to create content for it? The answer, as we found, is a lot of people. That people want to create. It's a fundamental need that they have. So the real point is, you only need a tiny percentage of creators to make UGC work. You just need a cool tool set as well. So why do creators create? Now, we found with Robocraft, because it's like a competitive multiplayer shooter, the reason why they create is that they want a competitive edge. They want their robot to not only look different, they want it to perform different, and they want to basically kick the bums of everyone that they're playing against. That's a really big motivator. The second motivator that we've noticed is kudos. In order for a creator to feel like they have kudos, they need to be creating for a massive community. So we had a player called Cluely who joined our development team. He was a big name in the Robocraft community because he made robots that no one else could. And he was a minor internet celebrity within the community, and he really, really enjoyed that. The final motivator is money. So Roblox has a fantastic system where creators can essentially sell access to their product, and they can make quite a lot of money from that. So that's another motivator as well. We actually did some research, and it's projected that Roblox users will make, or creators in that community will make over $30 million next year. So, if you can, given your community monetary reasons for producing content, that helps as well. So, few things that I said. Creators only create if there is a community. You can have a very open UGC platform, and you also need to create, and it's the stage that we're going through with Cardlife at the moment, when we're, that game's in early alpha at this point. We're building it up to a Steam launch next month, but we had this really cool cardboard aesthetic, and we had this really good platform that we wanted people to build for, but ultimately no one was going to build for it until we showed what could be done with it. So for Cardlife, we created a survival game experience, primarily because our lead designer, Rich, is a massive fan of those games. And it's worked really well. We've had people coming to the platform or coming to the game to play the Cardlife like experience of establishing a base on an island and then kind of going from there and venturing out into the world and getting better at interacting with items and hunting different things around. And the things with Cardlife, it's a great example of both. It's a good platform, but it's also a good game as well. I mean, obviously we're biased, we're going to say that, but it's an example of the game serving the platform and vice versa.
So we're talking about, excuse me, we're talking about modding being UGC, and just to justify that a little bit better, I think Minecraft is a really good example here. Anybody who goes out and buys Minecraft today, if anybody doesn't have it already, they're getting all that mod content included with that base game for free. It's a huge game when you incorporate all the other stuff that is out there, all the texture packs, or even whole new game experiences built into Minecraft. So if you do support modders, and if you do keep them in your community, adding value back to your original product, you're going to be able to push sort of the scale and scope of that long past the original lifespan it might have without that support. However, modding does come with its issues, and these are things you're going to have to absolutely consider if you want to go down this avenue. I mean, one of the first things I think about is sort of mod ownership. The ideal modding platform would be completely open source. All of your assets and all of your code would be completely open source on GitHub or something like that. But that involves putting all of your IP and all of your effort out for anybody else to use, which is a huge thing, big risk for anybody who wants to make a business here. And that also, who owns a mod? If you think of really good modding scene, you've got people who make something, and then somebody else will take that and have a good idea and improve it and tweak it and take it in a different direction, and huge amounts of collaboration, either directly or indirectly. But if you want to start thinking about rewarding people for creating mods or for creating games, in the case of Roblox, you've got to make sure you understand who you're rewarding and who's deserving of that reward. In the case of Roblox, they've chosen to restrict that. So if you want to make something, you've got to make it from scratch. You can't take something that's there and work on it some more. That stifles creativity. So you've got to sort of make this choice. Another thing is the interaction between modding and free-to-play. Robocraft is a free-to-play game. We'd love to have mod support in it, but like so many other free-to-play games, we need to find a way to monetize our product. We literally can't make this thing unless we can support ourselves. And we do that through microtransactions and the things like that. And of course, if people can mod your game, then all that stuff that you want to sell, the hats and the masks and the weapon tints, people will just mod that and make it available. The other issue we have with Robocraft is how it affects matchmaking. You know, we need to bring dozens of people together to create these multiplayer games. If there are loads of different mods out there, we either have to deal with the fact that everybody's playing a different version of the game. How's that going to be a fair matchmaking experience? Or we just don't have enough people in any one mod to actually be able to make a game. We want to be able to matchmake people with similar skill together. We need hundreds or thousands of people to be able to do that. So we decided in this particular case it wasn't a suitable fit. Now, one of the things we were talking about before, in order to sort of attract modders to your platform, you need to make sure that it's as easy as possible. But we've noticed there's this relationship between sort of creative freedom and skill required. So if you think about, you know, the top of this graph, we've got game engines, Unreal, Unity, there's plenty of them. Obviously, you can make any game you want, but you need the skill, the resources, the time to do that. It's not easy. If you look at games like Little Big Planet and Roblox, they're designed from the ground up to be user-friendly to creators. You know, they've got a huge teenage following, a lot of people learning how to make games in these sorts of platforms. But the creativity is going to be somewhat stifled, the creative freedom, because you're going to do within those games what the platform was designed to allow. Now, with Robocraft, we made this conscious decision. We wanted to make sure it was as easy as possible, and we admit that we lose some creative freedom that way. But we're always aiming for this perfect little arrow down in this corner. If you could imagine an idea and it just sprang into being, that will obviously never happen, but if you get it that simple that people can make stuff, that's what we're always trying to achieve, because that's where we're going to get, you know, a huge number of people engaged.
So we've talked a lot about the decisions that you kind of need to make before you decide what you want your platform to be. What we also didn't necessarily think too hard about before Robocraft kind of became a success, and it wasn't an overnight success, it took a lot of time. And when we became on Steam, Steam gave us a lot of visibility and things went as they went, which was really good. The problem was that we had lots of issues with people creating things that we didn't really anticipate, and some things that we did anticipate to a certain extent, but you know, there's a lot of things on this slide here that you can kind of pick out if you really try. So what this is all about is essentially we had a massive problem when the game got successful. That problem was people creating things that we didn't anticipate, what we did anticipate, and they became a little bit of a white elephant in the room. It became a distraction for us as a development team. Like, we're trying to talk to people about features, and instead they were sharing pictures of what they just faced in battle. So we needed to do something about these fairly quickly. I will skip over this slide now. So essentially, we had to think about a content control system. Now, from day one with Robocraft, because we were talking with the community so often, so much, we had these early adopters that were really, really amazing to us. And they highlighted a lot of these robots that we could deal with on ourselves, which is really good. But fundamentally, people were making thousands upon thousands of robots every single day. As a development team, we couldn't keep up. And we needed to moderate these somehow. Alex talked about the community robot factory. This is where you can upload your robots. And essentially what happened is that they became a distraction. We needed to figure out a way to remove them. And we came up with loads of different ideas. We came up with pattern recognition analysis. It's a problem if you want to, if you want to create a robot that's shaped like an aubergine, that should be okay. It shouldn't be a problem if it's shaped like something else. And we also came up with ideas of, like, if we essentially didn't allow you to upload something until it was seen by our moderation team. That didn't really work either. We thought about all these things, and we came up with a really elegant solution, which was essentially to allow the community to moderate itself. So for every time you upload a robot, or every time you essentially come across a robot in the CRF, you can decide to flag it as being unsuitable. And when you do this, it's not only removed from your feed, it's also sent to us as well. And once we had, I think it was around about 5 at that time, it was taken off everyone's feed. But the original content creator still saw it in their feed. So all they saw was that the robot wasn't being downloaded as much as possible, which was really good. So essentially, we put that system in place in around about 2 weeks, and it's still in game today, and it still works really well. We have our mods and admins kind of working as the human side of that system, and also the human side of chat. And essentially, they moderate as they see fit. We talk to them on a day-to-day basis, which allows us to developers to not only eat pizza, but also to focus on making the game and giving a tool set that people actually want, which is really, really good, and giving new features. Another lesson that we kind of learned was this competitive versus creative dilemma. So with Robocraft, and it's very specific to Robocraft, this one, we had a competitive shooter where we had two kind of different audiences. We had people that wanted to create pretty bots, and we had people that just wanted to be the best and didn't care about the pretty bots whatsoever. So what's really important to note when you have a UGC platform is not all creators have the same goals. Some people just want to create whatever crazy things they have in their imagination. Other people just want to grief other people as hard as possible. So in Robocraft's case, we essentially had this new cube type that we wanted to add in our mind because these artbot creators wanted us to give them more tools. It's the pointed one that you can see on the slide there. We gave it to the artbot creators and gave it to everyone within a couple of weeks. And what we found was, essentially, you can see two robots on the slide. The top one isn't very pretty at all, and it came from these pointed little robots. And essentially what happened is these things took over the meta of the game. They were everywhere. They were annihilating everything, which meant that if you wanted to be creative and wanted to create Barney the dinosaur or, you know, velociraptors or whatever, you couldn't, because as soon as you took it into battle, it would get absolutely annihilated. So we need to figure out a way to solve this. The way we did that is we just made the weight values completely neutral, and that solved the problem. It meant that our bot creators could continue to create whatever they wanted, and it meant that the guys that just wanted to be super competitive had to think of other ways to kind of game the meta. We took this lesson that we learned with Cardlife. Now, in Cardlife, like you saw in the trailer before, you can essentially create your character in any way you see fit. You can make a character with a massive hole in their head if you want. And we've got ranged combat in the game. Now, if you look at that character, you would think, okay, if I shoot an arrow at that guy, it's going to go straight through his head. It doesn't. All of our hitbox values are completely neutral, regardless of what character type you choose or what shape they take. So, yeah, definitely have that in mind. Have this competitive versus creative dilemma in mind when you're creating your UGC platform.
So I'd like to finish and summarize by coming back to the topic of this presentation, which really is Freejam's mission to create huge games with tiny teams. See Wikipedia up there, might seem a little strange, but we see Wikipedia as this huge collaborative user-generated content platform. It's harnessed the efforts of hundreds of thousands of people to make its encyclopedia and has done such a good job that most other encyclopedias are now obsolete. So it's our aspiration to try to be as successful in building communities to create our games as Wikipedia has been building its community to create its encyclopedia. Hopefully, every time we make a game, everything we encounter is going to teach us the skills and the knowledge that we need to embrace that challenge.
Cool. And that's the end of the presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Cool. One sec. I think the mic dude's coming around.
You said you'd kind of balanced out the hitbox thing with the ability to cut out any section of cardboard you like by making the hitboxes universal even if the shapes aren't. Is that not also going to be kind of confusing if someone gives themselves like a really thin sort of stick head and then you don't actually know where the edge of the box is when you're shooting arrows at them?
It definitely is something that you need to communicate to the player for sure. What I would say with Cardlife is that it's not really a competitive shooter, like it's not built that way. It has, we've got aspirations for it to be a PvP thing like Ark or, the Forest or whatever, but, I think that as long as you explain to the user when they're creating their character, what the limitations are of what they're doing, I think most of the time they're okay with it. What we found with Robocraft is, like, what people really dislike is when they've spent, a week or 2 weeks making a robot that absolutely kills everything else, and then you come in with a fix that completely neuters that robot. Like, people don't like that. It stifles their creativity. But in order for, a competitive multiplayer thing to work, you need to do it that way. But yeah, it's a fair point. We definitely need to work on in-game messaging for that stuff. But, it's one of those things with Freejam, like, we pride ourselves on talking to the community constantly and also looking at all the analytics data as well. So, if, for example, we saw a retention drop, let's say, after we implemented that system, we would go back and have a look at it again and go, okay, what's the reason why people are tuning out of this game? Or if we saw people complaining about it on the forums. But we don't yet, so that's okay. But, they might complain about it in the future, and then we can take a look at it again. Cool. too.
How often were the builds being released during early development for the community to give you feedback?
We initially were churning out builds of Robocraft sort of every 2 weeks, and even then, because we were going so quickly, we were inevitably making small mistakes. We were doing little hot patch fixes even between those 2 weeks. So in the early days, we were really churning through it as quickly as we can. As soon as we get an idea, as soon as somebody gives us a direction, we drop that on them as quickly as we can and find out really quickly if it's going to work or not. And then if we know it's going to work, keep going in that direction. If not, we know we can go in a different direction. It's a really good way of working because it just allows you to really focus your efforts on what's going to work and what your audience wants.
Did you keep previous builds available during those times as well?
No, that's not something we've ever done. One of the issues, because we're a competitive multiplayer shooter, we wanted to be able to match make people based on skill and various other factors like that, which obviously needs as big a pool of players as possible. So we didn't want to subdivide people into different versions.
Okay.
It's very good idea though if your game isn't dependent on that problem.
So my question is about the user creation tools themselves. What design process did you go through to understand exactly where you were supposed to pitch those tools? Because I think developers, we have very rough and ready tools that we use ourselves to create content. When did you know that you had the right implementation for your user base?
So for Robocraft, we started out with this vision of being as simple as possible. The initial vision, just before we even knew we were making a multiplayer game, before we even knew we were making a combat-oriented game, it was, let's give you some blocks. We've all played with some kind of block thing when we were children. Give you some blocks, give you some wheels, you decide what that shape that takes, and we'll take care of making sure that that vehicle works. So the code behind the scenes is figuring out, those are the front loaders with the steering wheels, those are the back loaders, okay, we'll take care of it. So by starting off with this vision of making it as simple as possible, we knew we had something that virtually anybody was going to be able to pick up and have some degree of fun with. And that's what we then put into the first launch. That's when we started talking to our community, and we could immediately start getting that feedback of, this is too simple, we want more complexity, or this is too complex, give us the tools. And it really is that relationship that we have with our community that's telling us, we want this, we want that. One of the things we put on quite early on is a mirror line. You can hit a key, it puts a mirror line in, so everything you build is duplicated to the other side. You make a symmetrical robot very quickly and very easily. And that was definitely in response to user feedback saying, hey, we want to make symmetrical robots. Give us a tool to allow us to do that.
It sounds like your initial pitch was, if I was a child, how would I put these components together?
I don't know that it was aimed at children specifically. It was just, how can we make something simple, make the fun as easy to find as quickly as possible. And sure, most of the fun things do start with a cool idea that a child would enjoy. Then you build on that, and you can find something that people of all ages can enjoy.
What I would say in relation to Cardlife as well is that, so in Cardlife we've got the connect the dots system, right, which you saw in the trailer. So when we were putting that together, it was a fantastic idea that kind of brought the cardboard aesthetic together as well, right? So that tool set started out as a kind of a prototype from our CEO, who essentially worked on a 3D modeling tool for kids because he wanted his son to essentially start doing 3D modeling. We had a really cool demo where essentially you'd be in like a flat kind of landscape, and you'd have like these hovering scissors and cardboard pieces and glue and paper and stuff like that. And ultimately it looked really cool, but it was quite restrictive, and it meant that when you were building stuff, it was it was cumbersome. So that's why we instead went for something like the connect the dots thing, which you're met with that whenever you do anything in game with regards to crafting. So it's when you craft tools, when you craft weapons, when you craft your character. So I think the goal for that, for us, and we're still making tweaks to that system now, is, we wanted to do something that was simple, that could work in the game straight away, so that then we could start seeing how people were interacting with it. And, we don't just look at analytics or feedback, we also do focus tests as well. So if something isn't working the way that we want it to, we try and change it as quickly as we can, and doing it in a way where we can get a result quickly, that we know we're on the right measure, is almost as important as the measure that we take to fix it. Yeah, that's what I'd say to that.
Hi, just a quick question on the monetization of UGC games. And I'm sure there are a lot of lessons learned when you get to ideal balance between user growth and monetize that, and also from your point of view, what's the subtle difference between different models within UGC games when it comes to monetization?
So the honest answer to that is that we're still trying to figure that out. So with Robocraft is a free-to-play game. We messed around with a loot crate-based model. We messed around with an on-demand purchasing parts for your robots model. And we've actually moved away from both of those now and have something different in game, which Alex can talk about. And our Cardlife game we have at the moment is pay up front. It's very similar to the Minecraft model. So you pay for the game, you get everything. And you can access as much mod content as you like. Which is the best one? We'll find out in like 2 years, I think. But what I would say is that when you're establishing a UGC model, I can't really say this to a business person, right? But I would, as someone that enjoys these type of games, I would say monetization should be considered, but it shouldn't be your primary consideration. Your primary consideration at that stage should be, what is my UGC platform? What makes it different from all the other ones? And then you can almost figure out monetization later. I think that's what I would say to that. But Alex, how do we do it in Robocraft now?
We've got various systems in Robocraft. We used to have a loot crate model where we've actually been taking that out in light of feedback. That's, again, one of the things we've been talking to the community. What I wanted to say, actually, was in the case of Robocraft, we knew what we needed. Once we realized what we were doing was a multiplayer shooter, we knew we needed lots and lots of players. And that's why the free-to-play model fit Robocraft. We're still very much experimenting with monetization, which is why we're currently trying a different model with Cardlife. So I think really the key, it kind of comes off what Andy said, is once you know what your game's going to be, once you've understood what your game then needs, perhaps that's the time to think, what is the right monetization model to fit the game that you've got?
Hey, so I think Robocraft, it exceeded expectations in terms of its popularity. How on the back end, on your servers that host the content that your users create, did you address scalability issues? How did you scale up very quickly to be able to facilitate such a large community explosion?
So we work with various partners. We're actually working with Multiplay, who've been great. We use a variety of different technologies. We've got some things we use Amazon S3. Honestly, I'm not the best person to answer these kind of questions. We have got server gurus back in the studio who are currently busy working on that problem as we speak.
I think we did use Player.io like way back in the day as well.
Yeah, so
right?
actually that's an interesting point, because initially when Freejam was very, very new, very exploratory exercise, there was a platform called Player.io, which was later bought by Yahoo, which sort of was a sort of out-of-the-box everything you need for hosting, multiplayer, for putting your data in the cloud, well, not cloud, on their servers. Really good out-of-the-box package. But then we found after a while that was quite restrictive. We went through quite a long process of having to sort of migrate out of this sort of closed system that was Player.io onto other services, some of which we had more control over. All in all, I think we have to say it was a positive experience, because perhaps we wouldn't have made the game we made or as quickly as we did without having so much of this problem sort of not solved, but so much available to us to get off the ground very, very quickly. One of the technologies we use now is Photon, which is very popular in the industry as well. So there's loads of technologies out there, and loads of people that will now help you with the hosting and help you get that stuff off the ground. So if that's something you want to do, definitely go and have a look at what services are available.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.